Something I love about the second act of the game is when the hovercraft opens up the world and offers you more freedom than any DKC game has in the past. We see the extreme ends of the environmental spectrum. In a sense, Cotton Top Cove and Mykonos are polar opposites of each other, with the former being untouched, pristine nature, and the latter being all steel and waste. Having them simultaneously playable, and for some players, intertwined, really drives home the game's theme of industrialization and its effects on the environment. But I'm getting off track now. Mykonos doesn't pull any punches. From the first moment, the Northern Hemisphere's island of industry makes it known that you're not welcome. This is part 19 of Overthinking Donkey Kong Country 3. The focal point of Fireball Frenzy is in the name, fireballs, and the level wastes no time in throwing them at you. Introducing Carbine, the gun-toting owl and bringer of death. Honestly, while on paper he shouldn't work, I think Carbine's one of the game's strongest additions to the roster. He looks cool, and the concept of having something in the background, firing projectiles into the foreground, is a really good one. It's super innovative, although I suppose Yoshi's Island kinda did it first. So, I can't believe I'm just learning this now, but Carbines are actually robots. Check it out, here's their official render. This makes sense, considering their initial design. You know, I don't hate that version either, but I'm glad we got what we got. It could be cool if their original design was reworked in a future game or something though. Not to harp on about Carbine too much longer, but according to the Nintendo Player's Guide, Carbine's status as robot is debatable. I think the renders look robotic, but the version that appears in-game doesn't. If they're actually real owls, maybe that's why the more robotic looking render doesn't appear in the game's manual. Alright, enough of that. Let's take a look at the level. This is our first look at the factory tile set, also known as the machine tile set. To me, Fireball Frenzy is the quintessential machine level, with its warm palette and pools of molten metal mixing really well with not just the Carbine-centric gameplay, but the music as well. The introduction of Carbine is a similar progression to a lot of elements we saw in DKC2. Not quite the 1-2-3 progression, but a similar building upon and expanding of the idea in its most basic form. First, Carbine is on flat ground, shooting in a single shot pattern. The second adds a pit and some bananas to lure you into the kill zone. The third is more or less the same, though with no incentive to drop into the pit, players might jump straight over it and find a hidden bear coin. And the fourth introduces a second Carbine, as well as altering their shooting patterns. I want to point out just how intuitive the background to mid-ground projectiles are. You can always tell when they're within damage range. I know that sounds stupid and redundant, but trust me, it's a harder thing to pull off than it seems. Anyway, beyond that, the level itself progresses in a fairly unique manner, going back and forth and up and down, and has a much more open feel than is usual for this game. Carbine is the main challenge, and they chop it up as the level progresses, introducing bursts of fire and patterns, each of which require new approaches. There's a particularly tense spot on an elevator, where two Carbines are taking turns shooting at you. Might be a bit of a stretch, but to me, this feels like a nod to the cannon scene in Chain Link Chamber. The pools of molten metal are some of the coolest hazards in the entire trilogy, and the music here is one of the better tracks. It's a fairly long level, but I wouldn't call it hard. It's a bit of a marathon, but nothing even newer players can't handle if they focus. Squitter shows up in the bonus area, and that's always fun. He makes an appearance in every factory level, and with each level he plays a bigger and bigger role. That's got nothing to do with anything, but I thought it was cool. Coin's appearance is pretty stock standard at face value, but all it takes is putting a Carbine into the mix to make getting this DK coin a unique challenge. Like most of the best things in the DKC trilogy, it's simple on paper, genius in execution. Full marks for this one, and I think that's about all I've got for the actual level. According to the Nintendo Power Player's Guide, the Carbines were brought in to oversee production in the facility. As for what they were making, there's nothing here that gives us any clues, so we'll have to look outside of Fireball Frenzy to find out. Could be the logging gear we saw in Kremwood Forest, as well as later levels. Honestly, it could just be a generic metalworks place, and all the metal stuff we see in future levels may have come from here. There's also the possibility that this place made the weapons, armor, and equipment the Kremlings can be seen using throughout the game. I think that's a bit of a stretch though. And finally, and this is probably just me, but do you think the molten metal basins, and maybe even the level theme in general, is based off the final act of Terminator 2? Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if that film had a bit more influence on this game than one would think. Part 19 done, and we've made inroads into Mykonos. This once beautiful, now hostile area of Northern Hemisphere has no shortage of surprises in store for us, and I can't wait to talk about them. While it's far from one of my favorite areas, it's got arguably some of the most creative and interesting level themes this game has to offer. And what's more, this is one of the most narratively important areas in the whole game. Not only does it show us a glimpse of what K. Rool has been up to since DKC2, but it's the point where the entire game's theme of industrialization at the cost of the natural world reaches its ugly zenith. Where do I pull these words from? Fucking zenith? Get the fuck out of here. Anyway, Anyway, I said it all the way back in the first world, but this idea is not one I came up with myself. So once again, I'm going to link the article that first brought the theory to life down in the description and in the pinned comment. That is, when I can find it. If you've got a spare 5 minutes and you like what this series has to offer, I can't recommend it enough. Again, when I can find it. Anyway, part 20 is right around the corner, and it's a good one. So see you there.